Okay, so to write a hypothesis, I know that this can be a little bit tricky, and I do tend to come across lots of students using lots of personal pronouns and words that you shouldn't really include in your hypothesis when you're writing a core practical write up. So, just to quickly explain what it is, so a hypothesis is a prediction of what you think you will find before you actually do the experiment. So you want to be writing this hypothesis, not necessarily in your lab book, but on a sheet of paper before you do the experiment. So then when you're actually doing that write up, you can then record it accurately rather than it being influenced by what you already found out. When you're actually writing it, the language you want to use has to be very assertive, so using bold statements. And don't include personal pronouns, so nothing like we or I or you, and don't write believe. Okay, so there are no beliefs when we're writing these hypotheses. You can use verbs like hypothesize or predict. You can actually get away with omitting those. So you'll see in my model answer here how you don't actually need to use those verbs. The structure of your hypothesis generally, okay, will always start with the main trend that you're going to find. So what is your general hypothesis? So the main thing you're going to find. And then you can follow that by some specific ones. And in this situation, for example, you could use specific values for the Osmosis Core Practical. You could use the specific values of the sucrose concentrations if you wanted to. And then you just want to explain really briefly. You don't want to go into a full explanation, that is more for your conclusion, but you just want to give a little bit of a hint as to why you think that might be happening. So explain a little bit of your reasoning behind it. It doesn't always have to be as a short paragraph. You could number your hypothesis, so it's completely up to you. Both tend to be accepted, but if you do pursue a career in science, they tend to be written as a paragraph. Now, here's a little model example for the Osmosis Core Practical. The general trend that we're going to see is that there will be a greater decrease in the potato mass the higher that sucrose concentration. My explanation for this is that water will move out of the potato via osmosis to dilute a high sucrose concentration in the solution, which essentially just means from an area of high water potential in the potato to an area of low water potential in the solution. If I don't necessarily need to write that in there, but I wanted to write that to include some of that key vocabulary that I want to expand on later in my conclusion. Now, for lower sucrose concentrations, the potato will increase in mass as water has moved from the solution into the potato. So this is an additional hypothesis, and I'm now using specific values. I could actually say the value, so I could write 0.1 or 0.2, whatever that sucrose concentration is for my experiment. This will only happen if the potato sucrose concentration is higher than that of the solution. Finally, there will be no change in mass and thus no net movement. Really important to say net because water is constantly moving, but the difference between how much water there is across that semi-permeable membrane would be the net. So there is no net movement of water when the sucrose concentration in the solution is isotonic to the sucrose concentration in the potato. So it'd be the same. So really with a hypothesis, you want to be very blunt, very assertive, have these particular statements of what you predict is going to happen. Use your variables. So in this case, we're talking about the potato mass increase or decrease, and we're talking about the sucrose concentration being high or low. And then introduce a few of the keywords without necessarily explaining too much about them. So in this case, it was water potential, and it was isotonic and osmosis. Okay, so hopefully that is useful. But any questions, let me know.